Joining us now on the phone is Charles Ogletree, who is a Harvard law professor. Professor Ogletree, good to talk to you.
Hey, Andrea, good to be with you.
Now, I know that you were, I think, involved in this case, so let you take it from there, because you were a friend and colleague of Skip Gates.
Yes, I was called by Professor Gates. He actually shouted out his window of the police car to his secretary, call Tree, as he calls me, and she called me and said something about Professor Gates arrested in China. I couldn't understand what she was saying. She was just in tears. And I finally asked her to calm down, and she said, Professor Gates has just got back from China. He's sick. He's just been arrested in his own house, and he's going to the Cambridge Police Department, and he wants you to come over as soon as possible. And I quickly picked her up and went over to see him. The officers let me in to see him and consult with him, and I was there with him from the time he arrived at the police station until he was released about 5:30 last Thursday.
Now, can you tell me more about, first of all, his condition, his attitude at that stage, and what the police were saying to you? Well,
the police at the station, who were not involved in the arrest at all, were very cooperative. They realized that Professor Gates had a bronchial condition and that he couldn't breathe and he was coughing. And they wouldn't let him take any medication or let me give him any medication. You couldn't bring it in. That's standard procedure. But they did give him some water, and they also moved him from one room to another room where I could sit with him and talk with him while I was there that afternoon. And he was quite in shock from my observation and interaction with him, because he said, please don't leave me. I kept telling him I was going to go try to check on the bail bondsman, check on some visitors, but he was really constantly asking me, please don't leave me alone. Not that he was fearful of something happened. He didn't want to be taken back into a cell and not have communications with people. And so I told him, if I go, I'll be able to get back in. I only went out to speak with the officers and the police commissioner, and then stayed there until he was released and took him home that evening.
Is it your conclusion, and is it Professor Gates' conclusion, that race was involved, that this was a case of racial profiling?
Well, I'm not going to use those words. What I am going to say is that what happened is really unacceptable as the basis for an arrest for the crime of disorderly conduct. I think if you talk to any lawyer, any law professor, any judge, they'll tell you that what happened on these facts did not justify an arrest for disorderly conduct. It doesn't fit the statute, and that I can understand that Professor Gates was shocked and confused to find himself on the phone talking to the Harvard real estate office, saying this guy doesn't believe I am who I am. He's harassing me. Witnesses could hear all of this, and I'm in my own house. The Harvard police officers will tell you they knew him, and he said, and it's in the police report, please call the chief. What he meant was call Chief Bud Riley, who I know and who he knows, who's the head of the Harvard Police Department, to tell this guy, this is my house and I live here. And then the officer said, ultimately, when Skip Gates went out to talk to the law enforcement officers, thank you for providing me the courtesy that I asked for before you're under arrest. The courtesy was coming out of his house and still on his porch. And then the officer said, as a result of that, he would later charge him with the crime of disorderly conduct. But I think if anybody looks at the officer's own reports, Andrea, I think they tell a story that is just not really logical in terms of what actually happened, and it denies physics for these things to have happened the way that stated in the report. Skip Gates, as you know, walks with a cane. He's had hip replacement surgery. He's disabled. He has one leg shorter than the other, and all those things. And he's 5'7", 150 pounds. He was not carrying a gun. He was not carrying a badge. He was the suspect, not the intimidator in this case. And it was a very unfortunate situation for him, and it's been one for his family and his friends who've experienced this vicariously over the past week.
I do have the report here. I've looked through that report. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that Professor Gates is planning to sue the Cambridge police? Do you think there's going to be further action here?
I hope there'll be further action. I'm not saying there'll be a lawsuit. I think what needs to be done, and what I'm hoping will be done, is that from the community there needs to be some dialogue. This is an opportunity for constructive dialogue, because I have